This sim allows us to investigate spider traits. We'll focus on two spiders, Otis and Ruby. Otis is brown with a blue stripe and a little bit of bristle, or hair. Ruby is yellow with a black stripe and a lot of bristle. We'll look at Otis's and Ruby's genes for stripe color and how they lead to protein molecules and, therefore, traits. Then, we'll look at their offspring and see how the traits are passed down. This is a model of Otis's cells. The bright pink shapes are protein molecules. The protein molecules fit together with other molecules in the cell, and together they produce blue pigment. This is how protein molecules lead to the blue stripe trait. Notice Otis's genes. Genes are found on chromosomes, and there are 2 copies of every gene. These copies can be the same version or different versions. Otis has 2 copies of the same version, T2. This version of the gene gives the cells the instructions to make the rounded protein molecules that lead to the blue pigment. Now, let's look at Ruby. Ruby's chromosomes also have 2 copies of the gene for stripe color, but she has 2 different versions, T2 and T3. Different versions of a gene are also called alleles. She has one version of the gene that is the same as Otis's. She also has a T3 version. T3 is still the gene for stripe color, but the protein molecule that is produced is pointy instead of round. It fits together with a different molecule and produces black pigment instead. In real life, organisms can't just change their genes, but in this model, they can be adjusted. Let's go back to Otis and change one of his gene copies to T3, the same version that Ruby has. Now, his cells produce the pointy protein molecules in addition to the rounded ones, and therefore both blue and black pigments. Now, Otis's stripe is black. Let's change his genes back to the way they were, so he has a blue stripe again. Next, let's see what color stripes Otis and Ruby's offspring will have. Otis and Ruby's offspring don't all have the same color stripes. Some have black stripes, and some have blue stripes. This offspring has 2 copies of the T2 version of the gene. One came from Otis, and one came from Ruby. Remember, organisms get genes from their parents. Notice the rounded protein molecules in the cell. Remember, genes are instructions for making protein molecules, and protein molecules lead to traits. Let's look at another offspring. This offspring has 2 different gene versions. T2 came from Otis, and T3 came from Ruby. This cell has instructions to make both protein molecules, so it makes black and blue pigment. This spider has a black stripe, just like Ruby. This model of spider reproduction helps us understand where individuals in a population get their traits.